everyone, so I'm here today with the spectacular Frances Hardinge, who has just been in the office signing copies of the new illustrated version of The Lie Tree, illustrated by the equally fabulous Riddell, and she's kindly offered to star in a video with me and give you some Halloween recommendations. First one I have to hand here is White is for Witching by Helen Oyeyemi. What's particularly creepy about this one is that in part it's narrated by the house, and the house has a very possessive feeling towards its occupants and the generations of different women in this family, and the way the house talks about all of the characters and it not wanting them to leave, and you're never quite sure if the house really is magic and really has any control, but the way it talks is incredibly unsettling. And there's sort of obviously ideas of witchcraft, and that the female generations in this family are actually witches, and they have brought this house to life through that, and now it's trying to control them. So definitely a creepy one to start with. And Helen Oyeyemi's writing is just beautiful.
I'm going to recommend one book that scared me a lot when I was about 7 or 8, and it's a book called Marianne Dreams by Storr, with a very simple premise that there's a young girl who's basically temporarily bedridden because she's been very ill and is having to be home tutored, gets incredibly bored, and then starts drawing with this pencil that she finds in her grandmother's old case, and starts dreaming whatever she drew. She's not a very good artist, so some of the things that come out are a little crooked and distorted. But she meets another little boy there, and they start interacting. She starts to get the impression that his son exists in the real world as well, but they don't get on that well. And at one point, she ends up scribbling over his face at the window, raising the fences and putting eyes on the large stones that surrounding the house, while saying, "They watch him all the time." And later on, she really wishes she hadn't.
Oh, no, that sounds like a good premise. I'll go for my next recommendation in CUCKOO Song, which is my next recommendation by Frances Hardinge, in a book that's quite unnerving but also very hopeful. So it's got a nice mixture of things going on there, and it's about a young girl called, I feel strange summarising her book, but it's about a young girl called Triss who wakes up after an accident, can't remember the accident, feels a little bit off. Her sister's decided that she's not actually Triss, and she kind of has to piece together what's actually going on, and a lot is going on in this book. My favourite thing about this one is that in a way you kind of end up rooting for the monster.
Excellent. And how that works.
Yeah, so that was what I loved throughout it, and I just think it's the perfect balance between hope, excitement, adventure, and a little bit of like an unnerving something's behind your shoulder, what's going on, and needing to know. So this is definitely one I would recommend.
My next thank you very much. That's very kind. Recommendation is actually going to be an M.R. James short story. In fact, there's lots I could recommend because he's very good for being read at this time of year. He's a very good Halloween read, and often his stories will start fairly gently with sort of lots of little mundane detail, and they will become gradually more and more creepifying. But there's one that I particularly like called Lost Hearts, and it's one of the very few that's from the point of view of a child. This young boy who's an orphan and who has been adopted by a slightly odd older relation, and who then starts to see the apparitions of 2 other children in the grounds, and begins gradually to get the impression that his guardian's reasons for taking him in may not be particularly benign, and that he may be in a very great deal of danger.
That sounds very creepy. Well, from one classic to another, I brought along the tales of Edgar Allan Poe. I mean, this man has been scaring people for almost 200 years, so I think he's got some authority for some Halloween reading, and this collection has all the classics like The Telltale Heart, but as well as a few that are like less well read. And we had on Book Break recently an episode all about where to start with classics, and classics you might like if you like fantasy books, or if you like romance books, and I didn't put this in it because I wanted to save it for Halloween and say this is the Halloween classic. And they're perfect as well because one of the things I think is best about scary stories is that they're so perfect to read with other people, and these are so short and consumable that you can read them to your friends and family and share that experience. So, Tales of Mystery and Imagination by Edgar Allan Poe.
For my next one, I'm going to go for The Turn of the Screw by Henry James, which is actually quite a short novel, pretty much almost a novella really, and read entirely at face value. It's the story of a young nanny who becomes increasingly aware that her two young charges are being haunted by slightly sinister ghosts of individuals with a rather dark and sordid past. The greatest strength of the book is its ambiguity, because yes, there is this potential horror of the idea of these two children basically being threatened and possibly corrupted by these dark ghosts. But there's also the possibility that this rather emotionally intense young nanny is actually having a bit of a breakdown. It is projecting all of this onto these children, and it's always a subtext. It's never overt, but this shadowy ambiguity to the whole thing gives it an extra depth and level of horror.
Well, thank you for sharing your recommendations with us. That
My
was
pleasure.
really, really nice, and I'm sure everyone else agrees as well. the ghostly people that you cannot see right now are exactly on the other side of the computer screen. Yes, thank you so much. This has been fabulous.
My pleasure.
So how many of you have heard of Hygge, or The Secret to Nordic Living? Johannesson's book is full of tips I can completely get behind. But why tell you about a book when I can show you what's in the book?